Here.
No. I think that's still on for you.
I think so. First of all, I was misquoted in the paper, and it was taken out of context. So I want to clear that up. I have no problem with our students. I have no problem with our teachers. My problems after recalibration all lie with different administrations throughout the state. We do the high five on what a great school system we have, but 49.85% of our students can read at a third grade level. As a big group statewide, when we graduate students, 50% can read, 50% can do math, 50% can do English. That's not the scary part. Our literacy rate, sorry, it's late, across the state is 23%. And by the way, I get the numbers from the WDE and the Superintendent of Public Instruction. Moving right along. The budget. I'll be watching very closely to make sure the siloed 11% go to the classrooms and the teachers. That doesn't need to be pulled out for anything else. Having been on the committee and helping write the bill, there was enough money put in there to take care of that. And we're already looking at, and I'm not saying y'all, just statewide, everybody's looking at how we can bleed some of that off for other reasons. During the recalibration process, not this school board, but one of the superintendents said one day, we need more money to keep quality teachers. And the next morning I asked her, how much of the 8.5% raise, the ECA we gave, did you give to teachers? You know what she said? 0%. Zero. Because we were already above the model. So we need more money. We give you more money, but we don't have a new model, so we don't use it for the teachers. Do you know how many school districts gave teachers the whole 8.5% raise out of 48? One. So my frustration is you can't have it both ways. You can't attack us and tell us what terrible people we are, and then spend the money we give you to fix it in other ways. We wouldn't have voted the 8.5 ECA, which is teacher pay raises, if we thought you were going to spend it other ways. The state budget's tough. Just like yours, not saying you have it easy, but we're headed towards a cliff right now. And we're trying to take care of teachers and keep schools rolling. And I got the 4 lying J's out there saying I said this and did that, and I'll take care of that in another forum and another time. But at the end of the day, we're trying to help. And I'm not saying, I probably could have used better words the other day. So I apologize for that. But it wasn't about students. It was about the process. And it's just like the development of the new high school, which on third reading in the Senate wouldn't have happened if I didn't get the extra votes. But I'm still seeing that. I'm still seeing people swimming in, quote, sewage. And that's fine, I can take it. But I just want you to know, my issue is with administrations right now. All of them. And when I spoke the other night, I spoke about all the administrations in general. And I guess the newspaper only got the one comment. And I've been quoted twice on that comment, and they've been different both times. It just amazes me. I just had to come and say this. I'm not going anywhere. They can keep getting hold of the governor to get me voted out or removed. Fortunately, the lawmakers before me protected themselves so they couldn't have it happen to them. But that's fine. But if we're happy with 49.85% and 50% across the board and 23% literacy, I'll be quiet. But the people who elected me are not happy with that. They're just as upset about it as I am. They're just not as loud.
May I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you define literacy? What is literacy in that context?
The ability to write, put together a paper is my understanding from the superintendent of school instruction.
I would encourage you to dive deeper into what 33 or 23% literacy rate means, because it's being portrayed as they can't read or write.
No, I said they 50% reading. 50%
So 50%
English.
can't read?
Yeah,
50% of high school graduates can't read?
according to the superintendent of instruction for the state of Wyoming.
I just wanted to clarify that.
And the other thing is, 40% of students who enter the University of Wyoming have to start out in remedial classes. We can have that discussion later too, because there could be two reasons that's happening.
I'd like to sit down with you and talk about that.
Yeah. But
Mr. Ayers?
Madam Chair, Senator McKeown, welcome, it's good to see you.
good to see you.
Yeah, I think the last time we spoke was at the last recalibration meeting at the end of January, and we had a visit during one of the breaks, and we had this discussion about 8.5%. I know normally we don't dialogue here, but it's not every day we get a sitting senator here, so if you'll all indulge me and don't mind, I'd like to address that 8.5% because it's really important and it's a fair question. And when Senator McKeown says one district did that, it was Sublette County. I think if you were to see that illustration that was provided back in September, we were the 5th largest district in terms of pay raises for teachers. But it's a little more complicated than that, so I just want to take a moment. I'm going to share some numbers. I don't have a handout for you, but I think it's important that we know what that 8.5% means. And so this reference to how 48 schools took the 8.5%, it was first shared in September. I've never officially received it. I don't understand the math behind it. The title of that document was Average Increase to Wyoming School District Teacher Salary Schedules for the School Year 25-26. An interesting title was Teacher Salary Schedules. In my opinion, I don't know that it was pay. So I think I'd really be interested in the math behind that. The source was listed as the LSO, which is the Legislative Service Office. And the source at the bottom of that says LSO illustration of WDE analysis. So the Department of Ed must have done an analysis, the Legislative Service Office staff must have done some interpretation of that. If I remember right, it said that this board approved a 6.41% raise. And I think it was looking at...
Actually, I think you were 6.67.
Well, I think that's what we did. It'd be interesting to look at that. My recollection is that's what our board did, but I think that chart says 6.41. Again, I haven't seen it in a while. It might be something we can figure out where it came from. And I can tell you my colleagues have challenged figuring out how that math came to be. So I just have some comments that I think might help. Every district has a story. I know of one of those that was zero. It's one of the smallest districts in the state of Wyoming that they had an out-of-district place special program student that they knew was coming. That was going to take a majority of that generated dollar figure, and they had to save that to pay the front end costs of that. And I'm not defending what any other district did, and I just know of a couple of them. Other districts gave stipends or bonuses because they were fearful of putting additions on their salary schedule, not knowing if they were going to be funded that. So again, I can only tell one story, and I think it would help us because this board was proud to do what you did last May. So the ECA we're talking about comes from the 2025 session. And it was actually, there were some iterations to it throughout the session. And at the end of the day, it was 8.5% for two different salary categories. One's called professional by the state, the other one's non-professional. None of us like that term. It's not meant to be derogatory, but it's, the professional category would be everything from teachers to administration, those on the certified schedule. Non-professional would be all of our classified staff or educational support staff. And then special ed transportation is reimbursable, so that's on the side. It just so happens that the legislature approved 8.5% for both of those salary components, both the professional and non-professional, which apply to all employees, teachers included, of course. There are two other components to the external cost adjustment. One is educational materials, and there's a national index that helps guide these kinds of decisions, tough decisions you make. And the consultant recommended 1.067% increase in materials, and the legislature passed that. There's also a recommended decrease in energy. I don't remember energy being cheaper, but it must have been in some national index, but the energy cut in 2025 was minus 6.285. So I would suggest the best way to look at that is those four components combined. We can look at percentages, but percentages is difficult because those percentages are based on model salaries, not actual salaries. So there wasn't enough money in 8.5% allocation to give every employee 8.5% on what they were currently making, because the district pays more than the model generates. So for example, the starting teacher wage this year in the model, and we're going away to totally different systems, so this won't apply next year. But the average, or the starting wage of the model is $44,000 and change. Our district currently gets a regional cost adjustment of 6%. Someone can do the math. I think it'd put you between 47 and 48,000, and our salary schedule pays 56,000. So to your point of one district said we're already paying more, that's true, but we still looked at that total dollar figure and wanted to do something pretty incredible in this district, and we did, so I'll get to that. So, and it wasn't an arbitrary number. In the fall of 24, while this was going through legislative committee meetings, Senator Rothfuss asked the question, what percentage ECA would it take so that the state provided resources matches the consultant's recommendations? Because you might remember the state's allocation just happened to be less than what the consultant was recommending. And the answer to Senator Rothfuss by the LSO is 8.5% would get you there. So again, during the session, it moved around, and at the end of the day, it went back to 8.5% for all employees. So did the legislature pass an 8.5% raise for teachers? I would say not exactly, because it was based on model salaries, not actual. So it's, in my opinion, the best way to look at this is what did that 8.5% create for new dollars to the district? And the answer to that, if you were here last May, was $6 million. So in total, all four of those ECAs, the minus in energy, the two wages of 8.5% created $6 million. So what did we do with that? So right off the top, we had a drop of enrollment, and that's changing to how we'll deal with that going forward. But that drop in enrollment was estimated by our business department at, I think it was about 475,000. And then on top of that, there was a change in insurance funding. And because Laramie One added a new plan, it actually drove down the composite that districts were provided. And so we lost about $300,000 in insurance funding last year. And then our own insurance went up, and the cost of the district, not the employee side, but the employer side, went up $740,000. So out of that $6 million, if you look at the loss of enrollment, 400,000, the two insurance pieces, we really had about 4.5 million left to discuss for employee compensation, if you look at it that way. But certainly understanding the legislature's intent, we approved what I would say is far more than the 4.5 million. Let's just say the 6 million generated by the ECAs. Of course, there's other costs that aren't calculated here. I'm just giving you the big rocks. So last year, the employee base salaries were increased 6.67%. And I think somewhere in there, there was an analysis of the salary schedules. The other thing that changed on the teacher salary schedule was for an additional year of service, if you were able to take a step for experience, that was changed from $1,100 to $1,200. And you might remember me saying that I didn't think that was going to cost much. And it was $1 million. And first, when I had the math done, I couldn't figure it out. But so basically, if you were on step 20 masters plus 30 credits, you're on step 20. not only did you get the base change of $3,500, you also got $1,200 for going to step 21. You also basically got back pay of 19 times for $100 each iteration in the salary schedule. And then we also changed topped out for bachelor's 45, master's 45, and doctorate columns for teachers and those on that schedule from 2 to 3%. So at the end of the day, the change to base salaries in our district were $7 million. The cost of an experienced step, and I'm talking for all employees, was $2.25 million. Again, $1 million for the change in how we looked at teacher steps. And I'm really proud of our ESP staff, who had some bumps the previous 2 years because of some wage studies and we needed to get into market. They were really supportive of giving more resources to teachers. And then that topped-in stipend was about $70,000. So the cost of raises district-wide was a little over $10.3 million last year. And I just want you all to know that the certified staff, and it's primarily teachers, or a few other people on that teacher salary schedule, the certified staff received an increase of $5.8 million, almost the entirety of what the ECA generated in terms of dollars for our district. So how did we do that? So basically we took that $6 million, the 5.2 that was left over those three big expenses I mentioned, and we used reserves to do something historic for salaries in our district. And I think it was the third largest teacher raise in the history of the district. So it's a fair question. I should have taken the opportunity to answer that before. When we were talking in the hallway, Senator McKeown, you and I had a conversation about exactly this, and I said, I'm going to testify later in the day. I hope you'll ask me that question. And in fairness to the good senator, I think I used too much time, and the chairman was ready for me to sit down, so you didn't get a chance to ask your question, and I didn't get a chance to properly answer it. But in hindsight, I wish I had clarified that a long time ago, but I think the dollar figures paint a picture that shows our district went way beyond the resources created, and so I appreciate you entertaining that explanation.
The important part of my comments were statewide. It wasn't about Campbell County, it's the entire state. We're very blessed and fortunate with mineral taxes and royalties. So the attack was, like I was saying it about Campbell County, which I wasn't. And we can talk about other counties, and you were at those committee meetings also. You know the district I'm talking about that didn't give their teachers any raise and squawked the most about how they needed more money. So it gets really frustrating for us who don't have a line item budget like you do, to listen and try to take action to help out. And you know, I'm gonna be quiet because there's three counties that were really, or three districts, excuse me, that were really disappointing with what they did. So I wanted to come here tonight and say, look, I'm not picking on kids. I'm trying to give teachers more money, and we gotta get this squared away. And it's not here necessarily. There's problems here too, but statewide, I'd like to see us raise the levels of where we're performing. I don't think 49.85% for third graders that can read at third grade level is necessarily acceptable.
I look forward to having, this has been on my list, and I've talked to several people, our curriculum director included, and superintendents, of trying to figure out a way to very simply put what the Department of Ed puts out as proficient or advanced, because it doesn't paint the right picture as far as, because people just assume that it's, well, you know, 50% of third graders can't read. That's not the real picture of what they're trying to say, and we need to articulate that better, and I'm trying to work on that, and I look forward to future conversations with you about that. I do have a couple follow-up questions on, when we give a raise, say we gave, a staff member, certified or non-certified, when we give them a 6% raise, and they see a 6% raise, how much does that cost us? Because not all of the cost of a raise does the person see. Does that make sense? Like if we give 6% to the teacher, we have to pay, of course, you know, we have
Yes,
to pay
ma'am.
taxes and all of that other
You own a
items, so they
business
don't
and
necessarily see
Social
that.
Security, on and on.
So when you say teachers didn't get 8.5%, they didn't probably see 8.5%, but the total dollars is really what we're talking about.
Madam Chair, Senator McKeown, you fully understand, and, the numbers I provided include, those benefits, not counting health insurance, and so I factored that into what we did for our folks. And maybe you can help me by getting, an interpretation of that illustration from the LSO, so we understand how that was put together, and, I'm really interested in, speaking of the silo, and I can tell you I'm committed to figuring this out, and we'll do the right thing. One of the things we're trying to figure out is how are you going to be judged on your teacher salary schedule? Because looking back at that illustration from the fall, there apparently was something looking at schedule to schedule between 2 years, not the additional step for experience. I provided an illustration here for our board of about 12 examples of people all over the salary schedule, maybe a brand new person fresh out of school, and what they were going to receive, the 6.67. And then we had some people that were going from step 20 to 21 that were benefiting from all those changes, plus maybe got another 15 credits of education and another 1,200 that direction. But I don't think that illustration captured anything but maybe the changes in the cells, and perhaps there was some weighted average of determining that. But I just want you to feel good about the things our district did, and we far exceeded the dollar figure provided in that session. And but the methodology used to judge us wasn't clear to me, and again, I regret not explaining that sooner. And one of the questions right now for the School Finance Data Advisory Committee has Matt Wilmarth from the LSO on it, WD folks, one superintendent, a bunch of business managers. One of the things they want to know is, how are we going to be judged by the increase we gave to staff? And so we need to know, is it schedule to schedule, or are they looking at every individual and what the compensation change would be? So, but I'm committed to.
I wish I would have brought the bill, because we could have covered that at 10 o'clock at night. I feel like I was still in Cheyenne,
Right.
but
I would like to
The
say one other thing
silo.
about the cost of education per student. You noted that in your article, or in the article. I'm not sure if you're misquoted there, and I do understand being misquoted, so I feel for you on that. Comparing the cost of education in Wyoming to the cost of education in more populated states is just different, and they have different funding models altogether. So when you have a larger school district, all the largest school districts have much lower cost of education per student than the very small ones, and that drives the average for the state up really high. So
well, we
when
did
you-
close Chugwater down. That's supposed to
the
be.
consolidation would be your task, thank goodness, not mine. Redistrict, or changing boundaries is bad enough for us. But that, it's not comparing apples to apples when you compare the cost of education per pupil in Wyoming versus Utah or Idaho, because we're so rural and the cost of education goes up when there's less students in a school district. So I'd love to talk about that sometime too.
And I'll leave you with one last thought. The big deal of we're gonna cut teachers during recalibration, and the boogeyman's coming, and the sky's falling, and there's black helicopters flying over. We actually added 279 teachers, and we did it in the smaller areas to make sure they had enough specialty teachers and everything they needed. It just left a bad taste in my mouth, and you're right, it's not fun being misquoted.
The other thing I would ask your help for is just when enrollment goes down, it used to be a 3-year rolling average, and now it's 2. And that hurts when districts, are going down in enrollment, because, let's say 100 kids leave this district. They're not leaving from one school, there's one kid here, and you don't necessarily get to drop 5 teachers because 100 kids left. You probably don't drop any, because they just come in pieces and parts. So having that 3-year rolling average really helps us stabilize, and if it continues, then, you know, those pieces and parts eventually add up and we can downsize, but 3 years to accomplish that really helps. So that's something I asked for your help with.
The big argument over that was 1 versus 3. And I guess, for lack of a better reason, we settled the 2 because it was in the middle. I could have gone either way on that.
Well, hopefully we get another opportunity in the future and you can help us out with that, because it does matter and it's not always feasible to cut that fast because of the reason I stated. So,
And I do understand the ADM.
yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming tonight. It was kind of nice to have a little conversation. I think, I appreciate you coming, and, maybe we should just schedule you to come.
Well,
It'd be beneficial for everyone.
I'd like to meet with you and the superintendent
I'd love to.
before I go to the next recalibration meeting.
I'd love to.
I'd rather work with you than
I'd love to.
feeling like I'm working against you.
I'd love to, and I appreciate the offer.
Okay, I'll get it set up. Thank you.
Thank you.